Hello and welcome to how to knit a simple coaster for absolute beginners. So to start off with, let's go over some of the tools and materials you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need the written pattern, or you can just follow the pattern I'm going to put on the screen here shortly. You're going to need a pair of scissors, a darning needle of some sort. This one is awfully tiny. You can use a bigger one, whatever works well with your yarn. This is about a sport weight to a DK weight yarn. I'd say this is a sport weight. You can use either one, it'll work. Sport weight is slightly bigger than baby yarn. And then 4.5 millimeter needles to go with this yarn, which is also US 7. And then the pattern, the written pattern that comes with my in-person pay-for class includes 3 versions of a coaster, 3 different ways to make one. We're just going to use this one for today's tutorial. Okay, so let's start by casting on 18 stitches. So keeping my tail close to me and the main yarn that's attached to the ball away from me, just like in the very first part of this class. Get a twisted loop on the needle and then begin casting on. 3, 4, 5, 6, 16, 17, and my tail is really short, 18. Okay, you want to make sure to cast on fairly loosely so that your cast on edge isn't shorter, less wide, narrower than the rest of your fabric. Now we're going to turn the work around, hold the little tail out of our way, and I am a continental knitter, so that is how I'm going to knit this little coaster. You just knit every single stitch. And see, when you drop a stitch, it's not a big deal to scoop it back up, and this is completely normal. Don't worry, it'll go away later. If you pull that first stitch a little tight, it's less likely to be a big gaping stitch at the end. So now we turned our work around and we are knitting back across. We are only using the knit stitch for this tutorial. Cast on, knit, and bind off. Those are the only stitches you need to know. And I will do a row in English style for you. Or a few stitches rather. I tend to knit much tighter when I do the English style. It helps to hold the yarn right there at the fingernail. Okay, so we are going to do this until the fabric is double in length than it is in width. So a ruler might be helpful, but you don't have to use a ruler for this. Okay, so I think that's fairly close to a square, but let's double check. Let's make sure the stitches are lined up with the fabric. And we're going to take one corner and we're going to fold it up to the needle. and make sure that corner is where it needs to be, and it looks like I am spot on square. So now you can take a couple of removable stitch markers. These are the safety pin or light bulb style, and you can mark, these are completely optional, you can use string too. You can mark the edges where you're going to fold your fabric so you don't have to keep testing it to see if it's the right size. And then you knit it until when you fold it at this point, it is the same length. How do you count your rows on garter stitch fabric? Garter stitch is where every single row is knit back and forth, or if you're knitting in the round, you knit one row, purl one row, round. So let's do this one because this one is only one color. So I'm not going to count this edge, which is the cast on edge. And I know I knit the first row, and it looks like this is knit. So I'm going to say that this is the right side of the fabric, and we're going to count purl bumps, but we're going to count them in twos because between each purl row is a knit row. Because you knit and then turn around, and this is the back of the knit row, and then you knit and then you turn around, and this is the back of a knit row. So we're going to count garter stitch in twos. So we do, this is a row here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, and 26 is my cast off. So I did 27 rows and then bound off. So I did not count this flat V-stitch row because that is the cast on row. I also did not count this bump row because that is the bind off row. I hope that makes sense and you are able to follow that, and I hope it helps you for counting your rows. Let's check one more time and see if we got it the correct length. It looks like it, so now we're ready to bind off. You can always use a ruler and measure, but who wants to bother with that? So we're going to bind off. Knit 2 stitches, pull the first one, grab the first one, pull it over the second one. You want to do this loose, or else your edge will be very, very crimped in, much narrower than your knitting. You want it loosey-goosey. Like that stitch is pretty loose here. As soon as you make the next one, pull the next one over, it'll tighten up just a little bit. So don't try to make each one look neat. Do that one last little chain stitch, and then before you cut your yarn, you want to give yourself about double or triple the length around your project. 1, 2, 3, that'll work. And scissors is great, but if your yarn breaks fairly easily, you can just snap it with your fingers. Next thing you need is some sort of darning needle or tapestry needle. And we are actually going to start by weaving in this end so that you can see how to do it if you decide to make this only half the size and not sew it shut. Threading the needle is the hard part. A bigger needle would work better. Okay. So I'm pulling that first little stitch tight, and then this might be a little bit better lighting. I'm going to find a bump here at the edge. We're going to go down about, we're going to skip a bump, go in another bump, go in another bump, and we're going to go in another one. Right down that edge. Make sure you're not pulling too tight. And then we're going to, I don't know if the flash would be better. So we're going to go over where this little hump is, and we're going to grab the next bump. We're just going to go up and down a couple of these. So we're skipping an up bump and going through a down bump, or vice versa. Now we're going to turn it around and we're going to start splitting the yarn. And go back through some of those bumps and split the yarn in a couple of places. And then we can cut that, leaving just a tiny little tail. A gentle tug and it'll just nestle right in there. So that is how to secure your end for only knitting flat, or if you're not sewing something closed into a double layer is what I mean, single layer. If you're leaving it a single layer, that's how one way to weave in your ends. Now I've made a mess. You gotta pull your end, not the loop, the end out of this last little stitch and tighten that down. Fold your work. Can we even tell which side we wove in the end on? Right there. We're going to put that to the inside where we wove in our end down here. And now it doesn't matter which direction you go. Well, you kind of need to thread your needle. A thicker needle would be very, very helpful, but they're put away and I don't want to go get them. Okay, just get rid of that. So you're going to do your best to just line everything up. You're going to whip stitch. So you're going to try to find the very corner of your cast on. And just stick your needle through that to get started. And then you're going to go about every stitch or so across, going through both layers of fabric, and you're just going to whip stitch it, putting the needle from front to back or from back to front, whichever suits your fancy. If one piece of fabric is slightly bigger, one end is slightly bigger than the other, just kind of zhuzh it with your fingers and keep going. So we're just going to whip stitch all the way around, including the folded edge. That way it'll all look the same. Now, if you don't want it all the way closed, then you don't have to whip stitch one end. You could have a little pocket. Okay, as I'm coming down here, I'm trying to make sure that I have the purl bump I've marked with my stitch marker. That row of purl bumps is going to be pinched flat. By the time I get to it, it won't be crooked. And that is the only part I care about when it comes to being particular with this project. And then, like I said, we are going to just whip stitch down. And I'm actually going through 2 layers of the fabric. You see how I'm lifting up a green and an orange purl bump. I know you don't know what a purl bump is yet. The purl bumps, the purl stitch is the back of the knit stitch. So I'm going through 2 bumps that are kind of in, well, looks like they're in between stitches, I guess. Whatever way you want to do it, just make sure you line everything up for a very neat edge. Now I'm going to take that stitch marker out. I don't need it. And just go through that little corner. Okay, now this is a great time to just leave it as a pocket. Could be sewn onto a dress or something. Go around your cell phone, which I would show you, but I'm filming with it. So you just do your best to line everything up here at this edge. It's probably the hardest one to do. You don't want it skewed like this, and you don't want it skewed like that, or like this, or like that. So just kind of want everything to line up nicely, and then you just keep going. You'll notice the edge is really bumpy, and I'm kind of going between bumps, but you can go through bumps. It doesn't matter. A bump and an in-between bump, like, you do you. It is not critical. As long as you are doing your best to keep the fabric lined up, it will be just fine. If you did it right, everything is lined up when you get back to the end. And then you just want to make a little bitty knot. I'm just looping the yarn around the needle once, and then you have to wiggle your yarn tangles through it. That will secure that pretty well. And then you want to poke down right next to the knot and go in between the layers. And then as you scoot your needle, you want to wiggle it around and go up and down and catch some of the threads from the knit fabric. Pull it so it's not tight. Go in a slightly different way so that it catches right there. Go in and wiggle it around some more. Pull it a different direction. Go back in and just thread it through between the layers one last time. Make sure nothing is pulled tight. Cut it off really close to the fabric. Give it a little tug to hide that end down on the inside, and now your ends are secured and hidden, and you have a beautiful coaster. Let's put my candle on it for reference. There we have a nice little coaster. Congratulations, you have completed your first knit project.